Hello, it's Peter Merrick. I'm so excited. I'm speaking with Susan Hamilton and Larry Kortkamp of OBBM Network. They've created their own network. More importantly, what we can all learn from this is they've taken ownership and sovereignty over the information they both receive and they share, because most of us have been asleep at the wheel. Now, I remember being told this years ago that if you can't find that they're asking you to pay something, the commodity is you. And many of us right now are waking up to this. And I think it was a trap now looking back, because we were all told the internet was free. It was like getting an animal into a pen and then slamming the door. And too many of us have actually suffered that. So my first question to both you, Susan and Larry, is why did you create OBBM Network? Why? What was the catalyst? What was the wake up moment that you needed to do this?
So once upon a time, I had a bunch of things happen in my life and it included the passing of my father, who we thought we would live, and it was years ago when I started off with my own show. So I forayed into internet radio early on, not knowing what it was, and a lot of people didn't know what it was. But I just I kind of needed to stay there. My oldest daughter had joined the Marines her senior year of high school. I had three kids in trouble all at one time. Learned I was going to be a grandmother, and all kind just my personal life was like, well, what else? And it was like, and I'm a very positive person. So I thought one of the things that I'd noticed, one big piece of it for me, was when my youngest son was incarcerated, and he shouldn't have been. If I could have afforded to fight for him, but I couldn't. And it really did start everything, because I realized that in the local business space, I realized early on, it was through Manta and through the Small Business Association, that 90% of American micro to small business tend to be family-owned businesses of 9 employees or less.
Yeah.
And so when I got to researching, oh, what does that mean? That certainly is something. This group doesn't feel particularly powerful. Well, that means actually what they care about, no one's speaking their language. What they really care about is education. It's the biggest part of their world, whether their kids are starting into school or going out, or they've got their own home office after they've moved into a brick and mortar. They're the ones that are going to fund the school games and make sure that they can be there in the neighborhood and the community. That's a big part of it. They probably are experiencing that 30% dropout in the high schools, and it does hurt them. It hurts the workforce. It hurts their own family, and they end up hiring from high risk pools, because it tends to be your sister's kid or the boy down the street that went to school with the other one. Hey, Miss Hamilton, you got a job? And yeah, I'll find a way to put your butt to work, because it's smart for you to do that. Thing is, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get your butt handed to you. So all those things happened. I was making those connections, that we weren't reaching a local business community because the laws on the books, we weren't standing up for ourselves over the things that matter to us. I mean, what taxation, regulation, the things that you don't go. Well, hell, you don't go to the council meetings. You don't look at the books. You have no idea what's going on. 8 people go to a budget meeting for Dallas County, and your property tax budget is probably going to incarcerate your own kids before it's going to a teacher.
Yeah.
Where is this money going? And how do you incite that kind of interest in people? And then secondarily is, how do you help this community do a better job of hiring from their own high risk profiles that
Yeah.
are in their community right there? And is it going to be okay to continue to incarcerate 30% of our population when that number is only going to get larger? We did not improve mental health. And it's clear to me that I was right all those years, that we've never intended to cure or solve mental health. There is actually a big control component on having broken people, broken minds, and broken spirits. And that, of course, has reared its ugly head over the last couple of years. So when I started this, it was very kind of, all right, we'll have a show and we'll start talking to other business owners, give them exposure. We'll start
Yes.
talking about the stuff that matters, and hopefully they'll catch on. But within about 6 months, I realized I'd gone as far as I could go with that. And I met a couple guys that really became close friends and said, Susan, you need to take this further. And through a lot of prayer, it's going to be, what is it? I'm just not going to do anything until I know what I can do.
Yeah.
And I was going to a coaching. I got a book called Halftime. It was one of the books that we got, and another book called Blue Ocean Strategies.
I know Blue Oceans.
Yeah, well, that's what we are. We are a blue ocean strategy. And so when we started looking at, okay, how do we look at this differently? I realized by reading Halftime that it was a media company we were building, that it was a much more than a radio show or even a podcast network or a radio network. And so it just kind of evolved into that. And then pretty soon I met Larry, and he was kind of going through some stuff with his business and where could he take his brand. And I really wanted him to take a chance on me and on the OBBM network. I wanted him to see what we could do with that. So he did. He jumped in, took a leap about 2 months before they locked us down. And when everything we had just started television. Yeah, just started television when we went that direction. And by 4th of July weekend of 2020, we had all gathered in, we had just signed a great contract into our first studios. And because we wanted to set an example that said, oh, hell no, you don't come after this community like that. Where are your guts? I felt like somebody needed to set an example for how do you resist tyranny in your local community.
Courage is contagious.
I mean, that's just how I felt about it. And he did too. And I'm really glad. And so did my husband, and so did his wife. And pretty soon we're all in my backyard and we're making stuff. And we built our studios, and we built the soundboards and built all the stuff and put it together. And pretty soon, when did you come on as my COO? Just this last year, right?
Yep, just this last year.
Yeah. So I'm just grateful to have, the brains and the passion. Giselle, she's new. She's only been here 2 months, and her fire is out there too. But we just realized we could do a better job supporting the two things that communism is completely deathly afraid of. That is a strong local business sector and armed citizens. So let's learn our Constitution and do great business, and then put it out on media. And that's really the gist of it all.
I think what you're doing is beautiful. I wrote my last book. It was, I have a new perspective of what it was. It was a cleansing. And I remember thinking about the name I wanted, something that would represent what I was feeling with small businesses. And it dawned on me, I called it the King of Main Street. The reason why I thought of it, because in Canada, I worked on a place called Bay Street, which is Canadian Wall Street. And, the people I really related to were people who were entrepreneurs who came with nothing and created something, and they were street fighters. And I realized that's where the meat and potatoes are. These are the people who actually create communities. And then I also used it because it was a business book. I wrote textbooks when I was a university prof, and I said, I have to communicate a business message, but I have to bring them to a deeper message. And I got really, I would actually say, obsessed with reading books on aging, and specifically initiation, specifically male initiation. And the reason male initiation, because what's happened in our society is, if I was a devil, and that's the question I asked myself, what do I want to do? Well, Larry and I are expendable. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to protect the community, because women and children are the future, right? Like, you don't need that many men to have a future. You need women, and you need children. And my message that I came up with, and it came through me, was that we need to initiate young men to be responsible to the community. And I'm going to use an example, and also elders to teach the community why things are the way they are, because we don't have elders, we have siblings.
Yeah.
We have a sibling society where our leaders are no one you would respect. However, the person who makes those sacrifices, and I thought that was important. And what's come about now is these business people who've had really good lives, they lived the dream. They're now being called upon to protect the society. The story of Cincinnatus, Washington loved Cincinnatus' story. And do you know that story of Cincinnati? The Cincinnati?
Don't.
It's a powerful story for all of us. And it's why Washington did not become king when he was offered it, because he followed Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus was a senator in the Roman Republic. Emphasis, republic, not empire. The hordes are coming to destroy Rome. The Senate can't agree on anything, but they can agree that this is a leader. He had retired to his farm. He had 4 acres. He was plowing. They beg him to come out of retirement, and they make him dictator. Literally, that's the name they gave him, dictator. And it doesn't have the connotations it has now. But what he did was he put down the rebellion. They offered him to be the ruler. He said, no, that's not my job. I came here to save the republic. He put down the sword and he retook up the plow. So he had the plow. He was asked to serve. He took up the sword. When he did his job, he went back to the farm. And Washington looked at the story of Cincinnatus as being his role model because he could have been king of America. They offered it to him, and he said no because he did his job. And the reason I called it the King of Main Street, because it's the kings and queens of Main Street who are being called right now, the independent thinkers, the people who do it themselves. What I learned from it is I dealt with entrepreneurs, and really what we all focused on, and I'll step back to what I was saying, their entire focus is like, what do I do to keep the cold sore from showing up, being the government? I want independence. I don't want the government in my life.
And they're so up your butt the minute you get started. It's really hard for people just to come out the gate with an idea and do it because of all the different bureaucracy and red tape. And that's intentional. Don't think it's not. But the only way you're going to change it is to build a lifestyle, because I agree with you, Peter, that we are the local business space is the first line of defense between federal, state, and local government overreach in a community that's unaware it's happening. We're the first ones that are going to feel it. And as long as we are compliant, we're going to be in a situation where there's no one we can help.
But we found out very quickly was that those people are very good at what they do. As you know, I've got a great friend that's in your spot as far as business brokerage, and he deals with people that come from those companies all the time, and they come from a larger business and they want to buy their own business. They're used to being a CEO, a CFO, or whatever, but they're not used to being an entrepreneur, right?
Correct.
An entrepreneur wears 12 different hats, and he's got to sweep the floors in the morning and buy the coffee, and then deal with vendors, and he's got to place ads. They just wear all these hats. We found that all these entrepreneurs of these small businesses, they're very good at running their businesses, but they really weren't politicians, and they weren't really comfortable.
And who has time?
They weren't comfortable in that political space. In fact, many of them have been that way for their entire lives. I vote. That's what I do.
Without even knowing how many elections happen all year, how many times the Constitution is up. I mean, no, just such a almost a willful negligence of civics, but not really. It's a time suck.
Exactly. I don't think it's really for that, but
but it's just hard to get out and learn something new.
People, right? So they hired a politician. I elected this guy. Let him go do his job. He's supposed to go do his job.
I flat heard that at one of the school board elections, because I like to work outside the schools and I like to participate in that and help people understand, hey, this is actually what the vote is, guys. And those were things happen. We literally heard people say, I don't have to know that. I trust this person to know it. Man, if that's not the fastest way to take a sword up the butt, that's an awful thing.
Well, then not only that, but in most of our local elections, they're supposed to be
nonpartisan.
Yeah, how does they say it? They say it nonpartisan, but they're really not supposed to know whether they're a Republican, Democrat, whatever.
I don't think today we trust a damn person that will not stand up for what their values are.
Just high partisan.
Well, if you read Agenda 21, it was all about taking over municipalities. They knew what they were doing. Like, that's the part that sort of freaks me out, that if you're uneducated, they're telling you what they want.
They're telling you what they're doing.
It's in the papers.
But if you go and dig through that stuff, and I think for me, that is what the lockdowns accomplished. And I think for the people that are aware, we got ourselves an education. And then we had to learn that other beautiful thing we have to know as human for our humanity is how to balance that. Because you cannot spend all your time learning all, you can't red pill fast. And we're going to have mercy on people that do not understand. But if you took the dive to understand what's going on around you, what 2030 is and what real evil looks like and how it's been under your nose all this while, you start realizing, whoa, we put those pieces in place and we are so damn close that for those things to happen right now, it's like, you know, your hair's on fire, but you can't act like that because the community they'll be repulsed from that. So there's got to be, and I think business education is the key, because that local family business, Peter, that small group we just described going into this, what they don't know about their position is they're 50% of our nation's GDP.
They don't realize
They
the
don't know the power
financial
that they have,
strength
as
that
you
they've got.
mentioned, to really, And so we want to educate them with, okay, if that's the case, then go get out there and make you some money. Let me help. Let's get you super profitable, paying attention with an excess of time and money. Maybe you can make a difference with some of these organizations that need your support because they are doing the groundwork. You may not have the feet, but they do. And they need to know you're backing them and helping them, you know, advocate for
And
change.
quite honestly, they didn't realize they had that much clout. The city government. There's a small chamber that's kind of close to our office here. So, and we attend the chamber events for quite regularly. And during a recent campaign era, when people were getting up and saying that became news inside this chamber meeting. The candidate said, as you well know, you guys are responsible for almost 70% of this local city's GDP is from small business community.
The tax base.
And they were just amazed. The business people that were in the meeting were amazed that they were responsible for so much of the city budget when they get so little of the city attention.
Yeah.
It's two-way. And I just want to share, because I when I was in university, that was the last time I got involved in politics. I was a vice president of external affairs, and I was in the second largest university in Canada. There were 60,000 undergrads. And I found out there were two types of people who got involved: betas, people who just followed, and psychopaths, people who would go and be killing cats when you weren't watching, but they were saying all the right things. Your current president, my current prime minister, there's something wrong with these people. You know it, you sense it. And that leads to the second thing that I've also come to an understanding. Most people talk about delegation. They don't delegate, they abdicate. They tell me they want something and they're hoping someone else is going to do it. When I was a stockbroker, I would sit with someone who wanted independence, and this is in my early days, and they were turning to me, and this is during the dot-com boom and, you know, during the 90s, and they were turning to me that I was going to give them something they weren't willing to give themselves permission to do themselves. The story you share, Susan, you had an idea and you did it. How many people actually say, well, if I had this and that? They live by what I call a delayed life plan. And the delayed life plan is thinking that it's going to happen one day, but it's not today. And when are they ever going to make that big change in their life? And so many people, that's what they do. And I came to one conclusion, and, you know, I'm going to ask you if you would agree with it. I think entrepreneurs give themselves the greatest gift of all, and that is the possibility to self-actualize. Not self-actualize, but the possibility, because you're running against and rubbing against the environment, and that's how you improve and you grow. And that's why I love working with entrepreneurs, and I live their way. I have never really worked for anyone. The only person I work for is my wife.
Yeah, I'm totally unemployed. I'm totally unemployable.
Me too.
Totally unemployable. I think you're absolutely right, and that is why the communist agenda really does go there. It does go after health. It does go after business. It does go after food supplies. This is documented history. Unfortunately, they quit teaching history, and when on our watch, when we weren't paying attention.
Civics. No
Yeah,
civics.
started, but history in particular, because
Yeah.
if you don't know your history, you're going to repeat it. And if you
Yes.
understood your history, you'd recognize this communism takeover is quite literally, I mean, this is, yes, this isn't a little bit of news media telling you this food supply is burning down and this farmland is burning down. No, it's all of them. And
Right.
it's intentional and it's a communist playbook. And that's how what happens to manufacture scarcity, because if you're hungry and you're dependent,
Yeah.
but a local business owner, what we can do, see, that could be really horrifying and scary. Or you could rally behind your local farmers and make sure they're sharing local, because the smarter, healthier thing anyway is to buy local.
Yes.
The entrepreneur spirit, you can totally shift the way you're going to go about. As a matter of fact, you go back to the farmers market and you're meeting people, you're shaking hands, you're developing relationships. You know these guys, you know the farm. You start having these conversations. And you start realizing, well, life can be very different. And guess what? We the people. You vote with your money. We don't have to be subservient to this great big monster. Instead, we can really create that parallel economy. What's the other phrase you used? The alternate economy, right?
Yes.
So we just decided to make sure that we're in all of those environments and advocating for that our local business community starts going, wait a minute, because you could do one of two things. You could freak out and not do a damn thing, which can happen, and it does often. Oh, wow, it's scary. I can't move. I can't do anything about this. So I'll put my head in that rock and hold my breath till it's over. Guess what, though? If we're that first line of defense, we have an obligation to do more than that. And that is really look at, how does my local community right here survive? And there's nobody we can't help anymore. We've got connection. I mean, you don't need to use Amazon anymore. We've got marketplace that does the exact same thing. All the clothing lines that you could possibly want, jewelry lines, fine jewelry, soaps, the things that you could find. Maybe you'd find the stuff at Sam's. Maybe you'd find it in a boutique. There's just nothing that a person wouldn't need to purchase for their own livelihood and well-being. But man, did we get lazy.
We did.
Yeah.
And I always think of Hansel and Gretel. I think about that story. I think about how they were getting the kids nice and fat to
Yeah.
eat them. I can only share my experience. I left Canada 2 years ago and I saw what happened. This arrogance, like every other Canadian, how we were a much gentler society.
Oh yeah.
We didn't have jails like you have in the United States. We didn't let people drop such poverty. And we, at the same time, we didn't have like super wealthy, or not that we saw. And I thought about it and I started thinking, well, we had healthcare. That's great. And then during this crisis, everybody's health records are centralized. How great is healthcare, right? Now they know where to go and who decided to participate. And they were making calls, and the people calling, they were breaking the law by, having access to your health records. So public health care is great when everything's good, right? Socialism is great when everything's good. It's not good when things fall. I'll give you an example. When I used to drive, the closest borders to where I lived were Buffalo and Detroit. They were about an hour and 2.5 hours from Toronto. I used to laugh. They said, check your guns at the border because it's illegal in Canada. Well, it's great when it's peaceful, but what happens when the people you have to worry about happen to be your own police force or the NATO forces they brought in last February, and you're complete like all these things that I was told. Again, I didn't question that. What made us better? It was, yeah, when things are good, of course it was great,
Well,
but
I think the trucker
when it
event
falls
was- I
apart,
think the trucker event was a big watershed moment for many Canadians to see just
for a
how-
lot of Americans
just
watching.
to see how
Yeah.
invasive
Mhm.
that government could actually be when they started to crack down on the money that they were donating, when they were
Yep.
confiscating money,
Watching the
when they were
arrests.
actually knocking on people's doors. It became a different viewpoint for many.
So a lot of people didn't see that though, because the only way you're going to see a lot of the things that actually are happening is if you understand how to navigate alternative medias. And
Yep.
so we have decided to build our ecosystem there. We exist everywhere, but now there's the advantage. And we say in the news that we put out every week, guys, you're no longer limited to mainstream media that doesn't respect your family, your life,
Right.
your business, your person. your values. Now you can actually look, there's 25 different free speech platforms that we're on, and that was last count, and I think we've added a few.
And I tell you what, when you start looking
yeah.
at the numbers,
what browsers do you guys use? Just a question. Which browser would you recommend?
I just don't have any success story to share for you, and I'm just using what everybody's using for browsership, and I can't wait to change
I'm
that.
using FreeSpoke a little bit, just because I'm getting a little bit better.
And he just told me that, so I'm going to start looking at.
I'm asking for myself. I did the test, the Google test. Have you seen the Google test? You type in everything and it says it's got 78 million links, and then by page 46, that's it. They've deleted the internet. They're controlling us. They put us into a crowd.
Oh, you know what? They're not American, and none of this stuff is functioning under any kind of national law. That's not happening. That is definitely global, and it's definitely control, and it's definitely communism. And so there's no two ways about it. We do all need to be looking at getting out of those.
Highlighting alternative places, methodologies, softwares, all different kinds of things where you can go and not be part of that ecosystem.
Google, they've been in the news a lot for what every other country suing them and saying, oh, hell no, we're not going to let the United States government have access to our citizen data. Well, that's the fact, guys. And I think the apathy out there that says, well, they got it all anyway. They know everything about me anyway. Well, fine. But this is not what they are after. As I mentioned before, it's about the interaction you have with your surrounding and your surrounding people that they want to know. It's not, so you might think you're just fine, but for crying out loud, think about the people that you're communicating with all the time. You're pulling them inside of this data web that is dangerous, because it's less about you or what that person is doing, and it's much more about that interaction. How do you feel about each other? It's sucking in a different kind of data than people understand. It's very much the essence of humanity that they are able to track. And like Yuval Harari says, you're hackable, folks. You know what? All of this, you're worthless humans. They're eating too much.
Right.
You don't have to live
I'm
like that.
sick and tired of listening to people who hate themselves. If you look at his story, his real story, you dig, there was something psychologically wrong with him. You know what I mean? So they've taken this creature and they just, and he's a stereotype. Let's find this person who hates himself, and let's have this caricature who says God is dead and everything. And he hates himself, and he has no children. Number one rule, if I got to change the rules, no one could be in government without a child, without children.
Understanding,
because they don't have a stake.
Really,
start looking. I have children. I've got a lot. I've got 5. So my thought is this: I'm sacrificing, and then there's freeloaders on this society who get to go and buy themselves 5 Porsches because they don't have to worry about sending their kids to school and everything.
No, as a matter of fact, they're going to look at your life and go, 5 kids, that's too many.
Too many.
Too many kids. Well, and so what they've done is they've managed to sterilize the next generation and to make sure that they can't and reproduce. We're already stopping the flow of population. We're no longer sustaining our population with the amount of death that's come out right now. I mean, it's mind-boggling that all this can come right under your nose, and the media that tells you a lot about the God we made media, because we really gave it a status that it's going to tell me truth. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Let me turn on my truth button. And they train, we allowed ourselves to be trained. I don't believe in being a victim. I just don't.
It goes back to Peter's elephant analogy with the string.
Yeah,
it
does.
Since we were young, right? Grew up with Walter Cronkite or Tom Brokaw or whoever it is. And those are the people that told you what happened in your world today. And if they didn't say it, it didn't happen.
That's right. A selective bias out of the trillions and trillions of things that happened. They said this was important. And I think it was at the Church Commission. It's when they asked, you have people working in media, and they said, can we please go off camera? They actually admitted back in the 70s that we were being controlled in narrative. And it's pretty scary because the technology that probably exists and the things that are planned are much more sinister, devilish, and I think there's several layers of this. Well, this has been happening to the West for like the last 50 years, where we've been like selling our souls.
All the things that are happening around us. Look, first of all, I would tell anybody that's listening, if you're unaware of any of the stories that we've alluded to, you can research them, you can find them, and I implore you to go start somewhere where maybe where OBBM
You guys have a thorough library?
Yeah,
that
so what
people
we
can
wanted
go?
to do is create a space where because it's not easy, and we've been in there for 2 years already, that it's not easy to develop these networks. But I want you to think about it. When you started Facebook, it wasn't either. You know, when you first started your first Facebook page, you had to nurse it and change its diapers and take care of it and nurture it until it grew. And just like that, anything does, because they are developing technologies and algorithms that help understand what those successful frameworks are. The problem is, if we don't do this, there's a very significant problem that you're going to find everywhere, because the whole idea of the sensationalism of news and information there's a power in that. And
Yes.
so we've got to decide and choose for ourselves, what types of information are we actually going to be exposed to. And I don't mean that in a censorship manner. I mean, there's common freaking sense.
Right.
I mean, you're going to see a little bit, and you can't spend all your time there. Don't forget the people around you that you may have a very limited time to love. Don't spend all your time in social media.
Right.
Make sure you're out there. But if you're going to go connect with OBBM Network everywhere. Go on Gab, on Clout Hub, on MeWe, on Truth,
Telegram.
and Telegram. The OBBM Network is pretty much, I don't know a network we're not on yet, but the minute I find out, we'll go there too.
Yeah.
We are about to be launching a constitutionally compliant business course on our OBBM DFW Locals channel.
That's
So
powerful.
if you want, that's going to be cool. We're going to be helping people understand that. But there's ways that we can start getting in and going, okay, all we do with the news is we take actual marketing technology, which is how they've sold this control on humanity. The idea that it's not you making money using this free network, like you mentioned,
Right.
it's about the behavior of people and how does that data get sold to larger corporations that can afford to master the narrative and chase you around till you buy their crap. But it's more than that. It's more than the purchase. All right. It's really the sell of an idea. And they've figured out how to do that because it reads your emotional intelligence. It reads those types of things, how you feel based on your eyes. They're using that technology for children in China right now before they're even allowed to go to school. They're using that information to create virtual schools in DISD. They're doing that right here. So, I mean, we have podcasts on that talk about it. So if you want to do a better job, represent better, have a better conversation. When we jumped into these spaces, it was pissed off Americans and pissed off sovereigns in every country that were jumping on, and it didn't sound like, oh, let's do business here, but it's like, yeah, and I understand that. I really do. But I felt like it's a big enough investment for us to jump in and go, okay, let me show you how to do business now. We got a free speech platform. I got the right to tell you the freaking truth, and I don't have to be a jerk about it. Now
Right.
let's do business.
Yeah,
And
not just bitching about
no,
things. We get
where's
on
some
and
solutions?
we found that we have these fireside chat kind of things. It's just this commonality between businesses. We have open mics here. So if we've got a heavy schedule of shows that we're taping, and we've got time in between shows, we have audience members that come into all our shows. So we'll grab, and most of them are local business people. We'll grab them in the interims, and we'll do roundtables with just people that have come out of the audience, and we kick the topics around, or maybe some of the shows they've been watching, and have them discuss that, and we bring them onto the air. We've literally got hundreds of programs archived for OBBM on so many different topics.
I mean, who guessed?
Yeah, you just can't imagine but they're so excited to finally be in a position, and sometimes they'll let their guard down and they'll say something they think is out of school or something they shouldn't say. And we laugh and we have a good time, but they're actually getting to say things that they really didn't have an opportunity to
Which
say.
it's important because we wouldn't have known. I mean, did you think, when you think about the supply chain disruption and the things that are happening there, and we know what's going on with diesel, we know what's going on with employment, we understand that scenario. But for crying out loud, that's also the violation of the 14th Amendment in the United States of America. Why aren't we standing up for that? Well, we do now. We're partnered with Move Freely America to talk about, to just educate people. They're already going to legislators state by state to talk with them and help them understand how to put legislation in place where nobody can take and damage the rights to move freely with your supply chain, with your business travel, it goes to your family from state to state, which is actually already covered. Little things like that. Last night I got to hear Nathan Shackelford
Oh, did you?
at Concerned Women for America. That was pretty cool with First Liberty Institute. And he talked with the group and he was talking about, guys, we just stayed on freedom of religion in the First Amendment. And from that, look at what they've been able to accomplish by approaching the community differently and approaching this smarter. And that's the way you'll notice on our LinkedIn page, do business smarter.
Yeah.
Just do it smarter. Start looking at your social media like, okay, no, you're not on some kind of a conveyor belt to hell. You're really not.
I really appreciate the U.S. Constitution, and COVID has actually taught me to appreciate it. I believe it was November 11th, the week of November 11th, 2020. I was doing an event where I was speaking, and I was at the Denver airport, and I ended up reading the founding documents. Like, I really sat down and read it. I read Common Sense by Paine. I read the Federalist Papers. I read well, it was one book that had it all there.
Yeah.
I liked those, and I was reading it, and the one thing that Americans don't know, which is the only country in the world, and I have an appreciation, is Americans are sovereigns. No other nation gave sovereignty to its citizenship, and the rules are there, and people have been, out of laziness, not being taught, they've given up everything. And it's really interesting if people start digging their history. Like, I've read Saul Alinsky. I don't know if you've read Saul Alinsky.
Yes, I have.
He happens. Yeah, I read both his books, Rivoli for Radicals, where he admired Hitler for being in jail, and writing Mein Kampf, and he said all great revolutionaries should be in jail because you write. He wrote that in 1946, and he was more honest about being involved with the mob, Al Capone's mob, in that book. And then he wrote Rules for Radicals.
That's the one I've got and I'm familiar with. I didn't realize about the other one. I'll read that.
I always like knowing the evolution of someone's thinking.
Yeah.
So I will start from the beginning and I'll go to the end. It was so apparent to me that Barack Obama was doing exactly what Saul Alinsky talked about when he said he was a community organizer. That was a sign for communism or collective or manipulation. But Saul Alinsky said this, and this is something that people have to keep in mind. He said, you have to start where someone is and to move them where you want them to be.
That's right.
So he had a problem with the beatniks and the marches, because he said, no, you got to wear a suit. You got to get involved. I just got off a call, an interview with a historian, Matt Edred. He's I think one of the best historians. And he talked about my country. We talked about Canada, and he talked about Pierre Trudeau, who was a communist. And he got involved with the socialist organization, and he quickly understood that never moved the country to his socialist organization. So what did he do? He moved to a Main Street party, and he took it over, and he moved it to what we have today. And this is what Saul Alinsky said. He said, dress in a suit, use the nice words. And then, and this is exactly Barack Obama. This is all these.
I think people
Hillary Clinton was an acolyte.
Yeah. To think about how they're infiltrating the parties too, Peter. I mean, that's just they will, if you do not know where your candidate is putting money, It's one thing to who's backing them. That's significant also. I don't think it's not, but
Yep.
sometimes you can't find it there. Sometimes when you realize where their allegiance lies is where they're actually who they're donating to, and because they are willing to work under the radar and be totally agreeable until they get into a position where they, because it's a religion. It's a religion
They don't
of
believe in God.
control.
They don't
Yeah.
believe in God. And I truly believe that right now there's a uniparty around the world.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't elect anybody. I think it's that these people are selected. And I also, I'm not going to be popular. I know a lot of people like the former guy in New York who's now living in Florida. However, he had a really great, he said everything you wanted to hear, but when push came to shove, did he do anything? And proof to me is Biden shows up on day one, signs 100 executive orders. And the other guy is telling, I can't do. This guy shows up. He can't even remember well, he doesn't drive a car, but he can't remember anything.
No,
And
they
he's
were
able to
handing him stacks. We could not believe it. It was so, do you remember what that felt like? That felt so much betrayal in those moments. I mean, it was bad enough. We were already feeling the, and then you start watching all of those, all of your freedoms just getting locked away, every progress being locked away. And yeah, you know what?
there's a good thing that came out of it for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's for all of us. I realize that there's no Calvary. That means each and every one of us, and together we make a change. If, let's say, 50,000 people individually decide that they want to leave Dallas, there's a traffic jam. Each individual person can make a difference.
Yeah.
And that to me was it. I'm not going to give my faith to this president.
It does play into our role and voting when we vote.
Right?
It's a much more powerful thing. We have not shown up. Our apathy of letting the other guy take care of it all and leaving. I mean, seriously, our election locations have been elderly people in the community that don't really, that's what they do. And everybody, we just all sat back and went, oh, they'll do it. They got it.
Yeah.
But they actually needed support. They actually needed us to be there to give them a hand and be a part of that team back then. So no, I'm not giving up on that vote yet. I still think that if we are educated about that and and then we have to do the other thing. We have to educate the legislators the candidates that are going to bat, because some of them have no idea that ESG is United Nations. The types of things we've had to discuss, the types of adoption that has come into our cultures has ingratiated and condemned us to United Nations governance over the Constitution. That's what's happening, and that's what's running our communities right now. That they can, they're just going in that direction, but they don't have a right to. And at any time, we the people, and if you don't believe it, come talk to me, because we'll work all that out.
But we also need to take a page out of Alinsky's book as well, and some of the, like him or not, his the methods were proved successful. So moving people from one section to the other. So instead of saying, I can't get along with either of these parties, like it or not, that's the two-party system, and that's what we've got. So the the Republicans may not be the answer to every one of your problems, but the Democrats are the cause. So you've got to align, right, between you got to pick a side, unfortunately. And it might be the lesser of evils for you, whatever you want to call it. And if there is an individual that is better than the others, then that's where you lead to. And right now, for me, the people that are better than the others are the others. They're the ones that aren't with the other people. So when I look at Washington, D.C., whether it's Republican or Democrat, that's the swamp, right? That's where these people live. And we need people who are not of the swamp in order to get things changed. So anytime we can lead in that direction, that's who I'm for.
I think we got
to keep looking for these outsiders, but just because they put on a different jacket and stand in front of the camera and say, I'm really not a Democrat, or I'm really not whatever this is, doesn't necessarily mean that that's who they are. So we see people like Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin came out and we were, he kind of got everybody lulled into the fact that he was a different kind of an individual. He didn't care which party it was. But at the end of the day, he signed where his bread and butter was buttered, and that's where it was. We need to take note of that. For me, I just hate to see us always getting suckered in for the same routine over and over and over and over and over again. We just never seem to learn from whatever history proves us. It just, my dad used to say the old adage, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it.
That's
Yes.
it.
And I just
That's
hate to
it.
see
Yeah.
us, every time we have a new person born, it's as if they don't have any recollection. It's 51st dates over and over and over and
No.
over and over again.
No, you got to start realizing that if we recognize that the common enemy is communism, and communism's big goal is depopulation and eugenics, because they still believe that they're going to create some kind of a better human and some kind of and that's the whole point. Then you're going to have to go, okay, where does resistance starts? Everywhere. It's too damn close. It's
Right.
at my front door. It's at my kitchen table. It's at my back. It's in my backyard. So no.
The issue I see with us, and us being all of us together, like-minders, is we're kind of individualistic, right?
Yeah.
The reason we are where we are, we're not the lemmings. We don't just all go to the same spot. We're individuals. We're entrepreneurs. We cut our own paths and we think our own thoughts. And when you try and get all those people together to have a common goal, it's just a bunch of individuals wanting to go all their separate ways, and it's tough to get them to do.
But when they wake up, and this is getting back to what I take from Saul Alinsky, because you want to read everybody's stuff to know what they're thinking. You have to go, like I go to the World Economic Forum and I get sick. I go in the Rockefeller Foundation, I get sick. I go to the Johns Hopkins, I get sick. I go to the World Bank and I even go to the government sites, I get sick. But you got to know, like if someone's going to tell you they're going to kill you, you should like if someone it doesn't matter whether you say they don't or they do or don't, they're saying this to you. What
They'll
Saul
say it
Alinsky
nice
said,
though. They'll say it nice.
Well, Saul Alinsky shared something in his book that we should be using. He said that the power structure, people think that they're some like together tight, like a tight group. These are rats. Put a little pressure on, they're all going to scurry away. And that's what he would do. And he used an example in his book. And his book was, you go down the Daily Plaza in Chicago, you have 800 people show up, you only get 15 minutes of speeches. And then you let them go. You don't have 3 hours because people might want to go shopping, leave, or whatever. You show that power. And that showing of power, that fear that we will come together and we're cohesive and there's enough of us to hold the line, will scare the hell out of them because they're weak. Think about a Justin Trudeau or a Gavin Newsom. These guys here, they're pretty boys. They never had to do anything in their life. They have sycophants who tell them how wonderful they are. As soon as a real person shows up and talks to them, they're just gonna fall apart. So we are much more powerful than we even know we are. And I want to thank both you, Suzanne and Larry, for the work you're doing. Your website address is?
OBBM Network Podcasts.com is a great way to get our podcast network. OBBM Network Brands. We'll tell you a little bit more what we do on the production side and where we are with that, a little bit more about the studio here. So you're going to find our channels, our television channels, OBBM Network TV, and all of our independent channels are on Roku and Rumble and BitChute. And we've got a big launch coming up, actually, that'll get us into communities wherever you are. So we are building, definitely love your model there, Peter. That's what we're doing. We're building to duplicate what we're doing here in communities everywhere to put power back in the hands of the local business community where it belongs.